بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. All praise belongs to Allah Jalla wa Ala, the Lord of the worlds, and may the peace and blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be upon His final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So this is the last lecture we'll have, at least for me, on this particular trip. I'll be traveling tomorrow morning, inshallah ta'ala. I would like to thank everybody, all the brothers, and if there were any sisters involved in the arrangement of the past couple of days' arrangements. May Allah Azza wa Jalla bless them and reward them with the best of reward. Ameen. Now tonight's reminder, which I will endeavor to not go on for too long, because it's a topic really that needs a lot of research, lots of discussion, and is constantly changing. And it is a talk which, if was given 20 or even 10 years ago, the content would somewhat differ than if it was to be given in 2018 as we are delivering it now. Because as Muslims, the challenges that we face, on the one hand, are the same, in that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes clear to us our enemy. An enemy, for example, for the Muslim is a shaitan, Iblis. فَاتَّخِذُوهُ عَدُوًّا. That you take him as an enemy. Shaitan as an enemy will try by any means to mislead Banu Adam, and specifically the Muslims. But I want to mention three things which inshallah ta'ala I believe will help us in our practicing and understanding of our Islam. And it is these three things which I think that we need to focus on, because there are many examples that can be given as to how to tackle this issue or how to tackle that issue. And if you like, they're never ending. But as individuals, as Muslims, practicing Muslims, there are three things which I believe, wallahu a'lam, and this is something which, my teacher said to me, that we need to, as Muslims, focus and protect three things. To ensure that you have good standing with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you need to protect three things. Preserve three matters. The first one is the Arabic language. Secondly is to know your history. And thirdly is to know what it means to be a Muslim, to know what it is to have a Muslim identity. These three things are extremely important for a Muslim to have knowledge of. And I'll go through ever so slightly, just a little bit, to explain why I believe that's important. So number one is the Arabic language. Now, why is that important for a Muslim? Can't we just rely on the translation of the meanings of the Quran, for example? Because the Quran is in the Arabic language. And there are many places in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. Indeed, we sent the Quran down as, or in the Arabic language. Is it not sufficient, or we can't just rely on translation of the meanings of the Quran? If one looks at the Quran itself, which in itself is a mu'jiza, is a miracle, it is the speech of Allah Azza wa Jalla, rahmakullah. Would it be right, or would it be satisfactory for a Muslim to not have direct contact with or try to understand that miracle, which remains with us, which is protected by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? إِنَّا نَحْنَ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. Allah Azza wa Jalla revealed and will preserve and protect this Quran from any corruption, from any changing. So it is not sufficient, and we shouldn't rely on a few or a small amount of people learning the Arabic language for them to convey for them to convey the meanings of the Quran to us. Because it's not the Quran, it's not just the Quran, but it is also the authentic Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ that we want access to. Now, if you see the Quran, when it is translated, you are relying on, and there are many translations that are in the English language, as there are in other languages, and we're relying on the person who's interpreting the ayat. We're relying on that they have satisfactory knowledge, that they have a good understanding of both languages. So it is almost a tafsir. That's pretty much what it is. When you find the Quran, when it's translated as in its meaning in another language, it's almost a tafsir. That's closer to really what it is. And with a tafsir, you're relying on that person's competence. As in the Arabic language, you rely on great ulama who will make tafsir that is trustworthy and is as close to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intended behind the meaning of His words. Because that is the origin or the essence of a tafsir. Tafsir is what? Is to understand muradullah, the intended meaning of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in that verse. Now, if a person is simply and always relying on translations and meanings, because maybe one translation you like the style of the language, maybe you don't like it, so you go to another one, or maybe you need two to bring you somewhat close to the Quran, it means that you're going a long way to try and understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually wants from you. So, is the Arabic language important? It's extremely important. It's extremely important. And how that this has affected Muslims around the world. If you see a great number of the early ulama, that they weren't originally from Arabia. They were not from Arabia. If you look at maybe one of the greatest imams of hadith, Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah, well, he was not an Arab of Asal, he was originally from al-Bukhara, which is where? Modern day Uzbekistan. Or Imam al-Tirmidhi, rahimahullah, Tirmiz, not too far away again from Uzbekistan. So a lot of the ulama of the past, Sibawayh, an alim of lugha, the great knowledge, the great scholar of the Arabic language, he has a book called Al-Kitab, the book, was a non-Arab. So even though in the early times that the Quran being in Arabia, it did not stop people learning the Arabic language. That it wasn't an excuse that they were not Arab, that they were not able to learn the language. And the moment you have a distance, or you don't have a direct link to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that it becomes, if you like, just merely recitation of the Quran, which is also extremely very important for us. But to have a lifetime's attachment with regards to recitation, but not knowing what you're understanding, or not knowing what you're reading, I should say, then that poses a big problem. It poses a big problem. And then if people start saying, this is what the Quran says, or that's what the Quran says, and the person doesn't know the Arabic language, isn't able to verify that, then there will be attempts maybe to change people's understandings or perceptions of the Quran. So there are people, for example, when people will misquote the Quran and say the Quran says, out of context completely, kill them wherever you find them. And that they will use these verses to put fear into the hearts of the layman, non-Muslims, for example. Really? That's what it says in their book? And then the person will bring out and say, look, okay, obviously I'm not going to show you the whole Quran, they'll do something like this. See, they cover the top and the bottom and say, see that verse? That's what it says. And as a Muslim, you say, well, how do I respond to that? What do I say to that? Because the person doesn't understand, first and foremost, the Arabic language and is unable to respond to that. So there will always be people throughout time who will try to distort the message of the Quran. So it is incumbent upon us, as much as we can, to have or try to learn the Arabic language, because preserving the Arabic language in our lives is one way or one of the means that we will be able to preserve our Islam. It's a means. It's not be all and end all, but it's a very strong and a very good means of us being able to go back to the sources of our deen, of the Quran and the Sunnah, the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you go to other adyan, for example, the scrolls and the scriptures that exist with the New Testament and so on, their oldest manuscripts that they have and whatnot, and what language? They're all translated from Greek. They're all translated from Greek. And once something is taken from one language, then put into another language, into Greek, and then Greek into other languages, then of course you're going to miss out on so much. You're relying on the translator to be thiqah, to be trustworthy, to know what they're talking about. For this reason, you find so much ittirab, so much confusion in the different translations that are, for example, in the different versions of the New Testament that you find. But as Muslims, we don't have that. We shouldn't have that. Because our source is the Quran for us to go back to. And this is, again, what I'm saying to you now is not an overnight kind of solution, but this is a mindset that the Muslims should have. A mindset over generations of learning the Arabic language and preserving the Arabic language, even if it is at a very basic level. There's no excuse for a person to say, well, it's not my language. I was never born into speaking Arabic in my family, or I've never been to an Arab country. I mean, I've been for Hajj and Umrah, but that's not an opportunity for me to learn the Arabic language. That's not an excuse. There are so many opportunities for us to learn the Arabic language, even if it be at a very basic level. And there's I came across, for example, it's about a 3 or 4 page PDF, for example, right? And it contains about 70% of the most common words that you find in the Quran. 70% of the most common words that you find in the Quran on 3 pages, PDF pages. What's stopping us, for example, from going through something like that and over a period of time becoming familiar with nouns, okay, the names of things, or for example, pronouns? Over a period of time you get used to that. So that when you go to the masjid, each Ramadan that comes around, you find that you're understanding just that a little bit more. And Ramadan is a good marker for us, that if every time that Ramadan comes, I find myself the same place I was last year, then you have to ask yourself, why is that the case? Why is that the case? Could I have not done just a little bit of study just to increase my understanding in the Arabic language? And you're the first one to benefit. You're the first one to benefit because you are the one who is hearing the verses of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being recited, and how that will increase you in your iman, because you understand the words of the Quran as they were revealed. So the Arabic language is extremely important. And institutes, teachers, they have in other places in the UK and around the world set up very, very small projects. Sometimes we're talking about, well, we need to start an Arabic institute and whatnot. That we think big, which is good. But something doesn't reach a large scale except that it started very small. As I mentioned the example of the Quran project, for example, okay, 1 day a week. Similarly with the Arabic, you have one class every 2 weeks. Sometimes it's too much for people to commit every single week. Every 2 weeks, on a Friday night, for 2 or 3 hours, you just go through some nouns that we find in the Quran. It doesn't have to be something really intensive, or we have to get the books out. We go through the different nouns that we find in the Quran, for example, okay? And then you do steps like this. And then once you have the desire to study the Arabic language, it increases, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just makes things happen for you. So the preservation of the Arabic language is extremely important, especially with the children. They have an advantage over us in that when you're very young, their minds, their brains are very fresh and they can absorb lots of information. And this is, general. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but generally when you are young, you're absorbing lots of information. It's good to memorize when you are young, that's known, okay? Your memory is that much sharper. As Al-Hasan al-Basri, rahimahullah, he mentioned that memorizing when young is like ingraining into the stone. When you make marks in al-naqsh fil hajar, making a mark into the stone, memorization when you're young is just like that. So try to use that opportunity when the children are young to try and learn Arabic and try to help one another in that, inshallah ta'ala. That is the first thing I wanted to mention, inshallah ta'ala. The second one is tarikh, which is history. And history is, believe it or not, extremely important for a Muslim to know and understand. Why is it important for us? It is important because, for many reasons, it allows us to understand how Islam developed. The Quran itself talks about history. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs us about al-akhbar al-madiyah, about the prophets and messengers, alayhim salam. That's part of history. In fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet alayhi salam many things which were there to correct the belief of the people at the time because of what they believed concerning some of the prophets alayhim salam. For example, Ibrahim alayhi salam. Allah Azza wa Jal mentions to us in the Quran that Allah Azza wa Jal ordered Ibrahim to sacrifice his son Ismail alayhi salam. However, Ahlul Kitab believed otherwise. They believed it to be Ishaq. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught us these things to correct what was misunderstood by the people. And similarly, when we read the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is a major part of our history, i.e. the revelation coming down to the Prophet ﷺ, and then how the companions, how they understood and how they implemented their Islam, and then after that the Khilafah of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and then Umar, and then Uthman, and then Ali, then Al-Hasan, and Muawiyah, and then so on and so forth. It's important for a Muslim to know this. And even from an Islamic perspective, it is important to go back to strong and good sources with history. Because when somebody is documenting history, it is easy for the historian to give their version of what they believed or why things happened. Because you can state A happened, then B happened, and then C happened, but then the historian may add things, but this is why it happened, which is their own personal view, which may be, subjective, not necessarily objective. So for example, Ibn Kathir, rahimahullah, in his book Al-Bidayah wa Nihaya, the beginning and the end, is one of the best books on history. Because it is a very objective way of way history was documented. And it began from the beginning of Bada'ul Khalq, the beginning of the creation. Also, a book called Al-Kamilu fi Tarikh by Ibn Athir. This is another very famous book in history which is very, very sound. There are, of course, many books on history. You have, of course, Tarikh by Imam al-Tabari. You have a book of Tarikh by Imam al-Bukhari, rahimahullah. These are very good books in history. Now, if a Muslim is not aware of what happened in the past, then it is, again, their understanding of where they came from or why things happened may be distorted and may affect your iman. May affect your understanding of, really, is this what happened? Was there really arguments amongst the Sahaba radiallahu anhu because of these reasons? And this is why that happened, and there was cheating and there was deception, and if a person doesn't know these things, person then may have something in their heart towards the best of companions. So it's very important to have a clear understanding on history. Now, just maybe 2 or 3 days ago, there was, I'm not sure which country it is, but there is a Christopher, I was talking with a brother today actually about this, a Christopher Columbus Day. Christopher Columbus Day. Celebration on, or remembrance on the discoveries of Christopher Columbus and the lands that he found, that he discovered and brought back to Europe, the tales and the stories. And in some areas of society, civilization, he is seen as almost like a hero. He's seen as a hero. But then I saw, and it's not done by Muslims by the way, this is done by a non-Muslim, explaining actually some of the realities of what happened by some of these people who went around the world trying to discover new lands, and how that they were from the cruelest of people and what they did to the native people in those lands, that they were enslaved and that they were murdered and they were killed, from the biggest genocides that you can ever imagine. And we're talking about not 2 or 3 million people killed, we're talking about 30, 40, 50 million people eradicated. That's a number of people that maybe is just beyond, it is beyond our imagination. We know it is a number, but to imagine 40 million people exterminated, removed, murdered, lands pillaged and whatnot. If a person doesn't know those things, you're not told those things. Just a few days ago, there was a politician who said, I don't want to get into politics, but the point is, a politician said that within the UK, in history, a more broader version of history should be taught within schools. A broader version of history should be taught within the schools. Not just, for example, the achievements that we want to look at, but rather some of the other things that other nations that they did within their history. Otherwise, you find things are whitewashed and that there's only one view of history. And this has an impact, believe it or not, on how people will justify their position within society. Like I said, it is a very, very wide topic, very deep topic. And I'm barely scratching the surface, really, about some of these issues. But my point is to know history, to know Islamic history, to know the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's extremely important. When the children are young, you teach the stories of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, and the stories of the Prophets alayhi salatu wasalam. It's extremely important for them to know the 23-year period in which the Prophet ﷺ received revelation, and also the 40 years before he received revelation. It's extremely important for the companions, for their names, Abu Bakr and Uthman, or Umar and Uthman and Ali, and all of the companions, for us to know who their names are, what they did. That here we are in the north of the UK, here in Scotland, okay, in Aberdeen, we have a masjid here, we have masahif here. Where did all this come from? What's it all about? You know, trace things to understand where you come from, what you're doing here, why we do these things, and not just go through motions, go through routines, and not really know very much. That you are the one who's just being told this is what you're supposed to believe, this is what you're supposed to follow and whatnot. But for you to be proactive, for you to be a person who is independent, that you want to gain your own knowledge, to form your own ideas about what all this is all about. And I'm talking about, of course, with regards to history. And the third and final thing I want to touch on, inshallah ta'ala, is al-huwiyya. That is an identity. That every single human being identifies with something, will attach themselves to something, whether it be an ideology, whether it be a way of life, something. They must find their spot within society. It is important as Muslims we identify ourselves as Muslims. We are followers of Al-Islam, and that we don't allow this to be changed or diluted. It is extremely important. Now, I was also mentioning this, I think maybe it was yesterday, with some of the brothers, about in this day and age, people can call themselves what they like and they're free to do that. We don't have the right to tell people you can't call yourself this. If they want to call themselves that, they have the right to do that. However, as Muslims, we have to be have this protective jealousy and protective love over our deen, over Al-Islam. So when somebody says, or the moment that they say, because they can say, I'm a Muslim and I do that. I'm a Muslim and I do this. Islam is not judged by Muslims. We do not judge Islam or understand Islam through the actions of necessarily people now. Because people, they will have shortcomings, they will have failures and whatnot. But the moment a person says that this is from Islam, and we know that not to be, we have the right to say no. This isn't from Islam. This understanding that you've come with, which never existed in Islamic scholarship for more than 1,400 years, this never existed before. We can say that this is not from Islam. But we can only say that if I have the knowledge and I'm able to refute. Because if we're not careful, that we will be in a time where, as it is with other ways of life, that it's completely organic, meaning that the people will define their way of life. The people will define what is good, the people will define what is evil. The people will define it. So that how they lived 50 years ago, the people will change what is good and bad. However, as Muslims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined what ma'roof is. Allah Azza wa Jalla defined what good is. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defined what munkar, what wrongdoing and evil is. From the time of the Prophet alayhi salam, so khamr, alcohol is a munkar and will forever be a munkar. Ummul khaba'ith will be the mother of all evils, always. Riba, for example, usury, will always be a munkar, will always be an evil. Adultery will always be munkar, will always be a wrongdoing. Where at one point in time, these values that we believe in, because we know it to be from Revelation, like adultery, like usury, like some of these other evils, morals and ethics that we have in Islam, a lot of that, or some of that now, has been changed. It's been decriminalized. It is legal. It is okay. So what was once munkar now becomes ma'ruf. And what was ma'ruf one time has now become munkar. And this is what the Prophet ﷺ informed us, that a time would come towards the end of time that people would not know what ma'ruf is and know what munkar is. That they would go the other way. It is extremely important for us as Muslims to, and again it goes back to, because you'll find the things that I mentioned all have a link with one another. Understanding the Quran, knowing the Arabic language, allowing ourselves to go back to the sources, to go back to ulama, to go back to people of knowledge. I don't want to give a misunderstanding that at the moment a person knows the Arabic language, that they're free to go back to the sources and not go back to ulama. No, I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that at all. It is incumbent, it is a must that we go back to ahlul ilm, we go back to the people of knowledge. Okay, because otherwise, and Islam, if you like, subhanAllah, is one of those, for whatever reason, Islam is the one thing that has somehow become cheap in the minds of people, in that with medicine, I wouldn't dare speak about medicine if I'm not qualified. Okay, I wouldn't start saying that you should take this medicine. If you've got a headache, maybe some paracetamol will help you, bi'idhnillah. Okay, but I wouldn't dare start diagnosing a person's illness and start. No, I wouldn't do that. I'm not qualified. Similarly, engineering, that's not my speciality. Or many things that require study. Many people say, it's not really my speciality, and I'll refrain from saying anything. However, Islam, that's not the case. That's not the case. The person, a lot of the times people just feel free to start talking about Islam however they like. Does it have any precedent? Is this from the Quran? I read somewhere in the Quran somewhere, and then they quote something. Is it from the Quran? No. Or for example, there's a hadith I read one time and it says, people making things up. So Islam gave us things, or Allah Azza wa Jal gave us things, I should say, is more correct to say, for us to protect and identify ourselves as Muslims. And we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمَنْ أَحْسَنُ قَوْلًا مِمَّنْ دَعَا إِلَى اللَّهِ, and who is better in speech, وَعَمِلَ صَالِحًا, and does righteous actions, وَقَالَ إِنَّنِي مِنَ الْمُسْلِمِينَ, and declares that I am from the Muslims. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala سَمَّاكُمْ, Allah Azza wa Jalla named us as Muslims. So it is extremely important for us to know what that means. As the Quran tells us what Islam is, what ibadah is, what worship is, these fundamentals, they will remain there. There will not be a time, for example, where Islam is so confused that we can't really get to the bottom of Islam anymore. There's so much confusion. That will never happen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will always, in preserving the message and allowing people who are truly and rightly guided, there will always be a people upon the haqq, as the Prophet ﷺ informed us. There will always be a ta'ifa min ummati. There will always be a portion or group from my ummah, zahirin, clear upon the truth. No one will be able to harm them. But we don't want to fall into a position where, because of my shortcomings, and from those shortcomings is not really pushing myself enough to learn about my deen, that things really become unclear. And then the person says, well, I've got an excuse now. I've got jahal, I've got ignorance, and were you able to remove the ignorance from yourself? Did you have access that you could ask people and speak to people? Did you have that? Could you do that? You could. Especially in this day and age where the world has become a very small place with regards to communication. You don't need to have conferences once a year where you can invite all the scholars and that they come to you and they deliver a message to you, as it was maybe 25 in the mid-90s. They used to have conferences in the middle of England and whatnot. Used to rely on lectures being put on a tape, a cassette tape. I remember in 1998. In 1998, there was a brother who was graduating from Al-Medina. And at the time, there was the CDs and things like that were not like that. You didn't have USB sticks or anything like that. And he said, before I leave, I want to buy an explanation for 2 books, so I can go back and I can study the books in depth. So I went to the shop with him, the tasjilat, the Islamic shop where they sell lots of tapes and books and things like that. And he said the first sharh was a book of fiqh, and it was 450 cassette tapes. 450 cassette tapes. And then there was another book which was an explanation of, it may have been Sahih al-Bukhari, and that was something like 650 tapes, cassette tapes. So at that time he had to get 1,000 cassette tapes just to explain 2 books. And you had to ship it over, and hopefully the tapes weren't damaged. And sometimes if the tape got messed up in the machine, you have to you get your pen out and try to tighten the tape inside, and hopefully it's not too damaged and whatnot. I mean, that's not really too long ago in the grand scheme of things, but things have changed so much now, and the access that we have to people of knowledge, to fatwa sites, to access to, for example, there was an application on the phone that you could download. It was called Bawabatul Haram. the entrance to the haram, if you like. And in that application, you simply, it's almost like a menu. It's a menu. You choose the book you want an explanation of, and then the book, and then you choose the scholar, and then you choose the chapter of the book, and there's the lecture, and there's the explanation of the part that you're looking for. Or you prefer a particular Shaykh, for example, you go to a search with regards to the Shaykh, and you do the Shaykh, and you find all the books that he's explained. You know, before 20 years ago, for example, I want to show how things have changed, and how before that big, what was at our hands, at our own disposal at the time was very much less, but there was so much more work and so much more effort at that time. Now, mashallah, we're saturated with so many things, devices and access to so many things, but with that, laziness has hit us. Laziness has hit us. Procrastination, delaying. So it is very dangerous, and I was mentioning a point there. It's just gone up from my head. And protecting one's identity is extremely important. And as I've mentioned too, the language and history and identity are three things that we really need to focus on as Muslims, especially being a minority. And we have a masjid here in Aberdeen, and the population of the Muslims is around 4,000. So to some extent, after depending and relying on Allah Azza wa Jal, we will need to rely on one another, that we will need to support one another. And that is extremely important. And Allah Azza wa Jal has blessed, I'm telling you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you that you have a masjid of this size. In London, there are many masajid, mashallah. The majority of them are nowhere near as big as this. There are many masajid, mashallah, and there are some big masajid, yes there are, but a lot of them are nowhere near this size. So in relative terms, for the amount of people, to the size of the masjid you have, mashallah, excellent facilities here for sisters, for brothers. So it is very important that you support one another and you work together in making this a success, because you will all be questioned. Every one of you will be questioned about your role in the masjid and what you did to ensure that things were running smoothly, in harmony. Because maybe a person doesn't have a title within the masjid, but the masjid belongs to everybody. You may, of course, for organization purposes, you need to have that. I mean, in terms of rights, every single one of you has a right that you come here. You coming here serves a great role in keeping the masjid going. You just coming here. Okay, it's not about whether I have a name or a title. That's not important. Not everyone's going to have those titles. But you coming here and bringing your children here, you are keeping this masjid active. If you don't come here, nobody turns up, then it's a masjid which is empty. So you coming here, you play an active part in that. And it is extremely important that you work with each other, support one another, help one another to ensure that this blessing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to you will be something that will benefit you on the Day of Judgment. And not something that you'll be questioned about, that you were given this great blessing here and that you wasted the opportunity. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from dalala, from misguidance. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to remain steadfast upon the deen of Allah Azza wa Jal and protect our families. Allahumma ameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. Inshallah, we'll have a question and answer session now. If we can request all brothers to keep the questions concise, inshallah, and keep them as questions. So we'll have 3 questions from the brothers, inshallah, and then we'll move the mic upstairs for the sisters to see if they have any questions. Inshallah, we'll start with the first question that was from yesterday, from Dr. Umran, who asked the Shaykh about your path to Islam.
Yeah, Dr. Imran.
Dr. Umran, it was yesterday.
Doctor is GP? Well, no, I mean, if you're a doctor, you can be a doctor in something else. It's okay. It's not unfortunate. It's fortunate for another fan. No. MashaAllah. Allahumma barik. طيب. So the question was my path to Islam. So in 1993, almost gets to a stage where you can say once upon a time. Yeah. In 1993, I went to college in Richmond, which is in southwest London. Now, I was brought up as a Catholic. I didn't go to church every week, but going to the Catholic school, they used to take us to church once a week anyway. So I used to see that as my wajib done. I used to see that as my obligation fulfilled in the week. Even though I lived literally, the church and the school was like a minute's walk from my home. So I was, engaged with Catholicism quite a lot. So then I went to college, and I chose a college which the norm for my secondary school was that they had a sixth form. Everybody went to that. I didn't want to go to that. I wanted to go to another college to experience something different, which is much further away from where I was living. So only three of us from our, four of us from our year went to this college in Richmond upon Thames. So I knew absolutely nobody. So I was in my class. I was doing a GNVQ Advanced in Health and Social Care. I was in the class, and obviously the first day everybody's getting to know one another, and I happened to be on a table where there was just nobody on sitting next to me. So somebody walked in, and it was, at the time I was looking around, and there was no other chair free except that chair here. And I was looking at him, I was like, oh, he's going to sit next to me. And I could see that he was, from a foreign country. I mean, anyway, he sat next to me. And then the teacher said, if you just don't mind getting to know your partner next to you. And he said, I'm Muhammad, and I'm originally from Afghanistan. His English was kind of, had an accent, and I was like, okay. Anyway, I told the class who he was, and he told the class who I was. And actually, he was a decent guy. He was all right. And because I didn't really know anybody in the college, and he was in my class, over the following, weeks and whatnot, we kind of struck up kind of a friendship. And so we used to have lunch, of course, at around 12:30. And then for the first half an hour, that he said, I'll meet you in half an hour, I'll come back. So I said, okay. And then we used to have lunch for the half an hour. I said, you know what, that half an hour, we're kind of rushing our lunch. Is there any chance we can meet a little bit earlier? He said, it's a bit difficult for me because I pray. So I said, oh, what, every day? He said, well, yeah, actually, I pray 5 times a day. I said, what, you pray 5 times every day? He said, well, yeah. I couldn't believe that a person would pray 5 times a day, because in my mind, going to church once a week was something which was quite an effort. A person praying 5 times every day. He said, we've got a prayer room in the college. Do you want to come? I said, okay, no problem. So I went to the prayer room, and when I went in there, they were making wudu in the corner. There was a sink. And then one of them made the adhan, and then they all prayed together. I just sat at the back and watched them. But what fascinated me is that the way that they all prayed together. So then after that, the Emir, or the one who was in charge of the Islamic Society in the college, his name was Ridwan. The brother Muhammad, he said, Ridwan is in charge, this is Wasim. He's in my class, and he just came with me. So he introduced himself. He didn't say to me, do you want to become a Muslim? He didn't say to me anything about inviting me to Islam on that first time. He didn't say anything. He just said, welcome. This is who I am. You're welcome to come here anytime. And maybe I can meet you for a coffee or a tea one day. So I said, yeah, okay, no problem. So then We'd done that for a few times. Again, he didn't push anything, say anything to me. He's very smart. And then I myself had some questions. And then asked about the prayer. Asked about, he said, we're Muslims, this is Islam. I said, okay. And then for about a year, this is a very short version, I'll cut it short now. So for about a year, I studied Islam and Christianity. And I went to priests. I went to an evangelical church. One of my relatives was a born-again Christian, and he took me to his church. He was a big American guy in a white suit, and he was talking, and at the end he said that he had visions of me coming and visiting him and speaking to him, and I was so unconvinced by that. I was like, okay. So then I used to watch Ahmed Deedat videos, and then over a period of time, you know, I'm the kind of person I don't like to make, especially big decisions, I can't make them straight away. I need time to feel comfortable with things. So then I met a brother who was Egyptian. That these brothers, they used to study with him in North London. And so we went to his house, brother with one, he took me to the brother's name. His name was Muhammad as well. And we went there for about 2 or 2.5 hours, and he just spoke about religion, purpose of life. And after that, I mean, I was just completely just blown away. I came out of the house, and it's almost, I didn't know where I was just struck by what he said. And I said, I just need time to think about what's happening here. I was 17 at the time. So for about 2 months, 3 months, I never really had any contact with Ridwan. He called me a couple of times. I said, you know what, I just need some time. I just need to absorb and do my own thinking and whatnot. And then after, in 1994, of October, so this year, 24 years ago, I said to him, you know what, I don't mind going to a mosque, going to a masjid. He said, okay, I'll take you to Regent's Park Mosque. Regent's Park, you know Regent's Park Masjid in central London? So he said, I'll take you there. So I said, okay, I'd never been there before. So I walked in there, and I think it was the middle of the day, so there weren't that many people. Anyway, there wasn't many people in there. And when I walked, it felt so calm. And I felt as though I was just in a place that I want to be in this place. So then I said to him, I said, you know what? He said, what? I said, I want to become a Muslim. Yeah. So he said, okay, we'll go and see the Imam. So the Imam's office at that time was just on the entrance of Regent's Park. There was an office to the left. So we sat in there, and he said, this guy wants to become a Muslim. So then he asked me a few questions. I said, yeah, I believe this and I believe that. I accept this and I don't believe that. He said, okay, well, you just pronounce the Shahada after me. So then I said the Shahada, and that was it, really. The rest that was in 1994. So هذا باختصار. That's usually a bit longer than I say it. And to be honest with you, I don't usually say it in English language. I don't like usually saying the story. But that's roughly what happened. Wallahu a'lam. No, jazakallah khairan.
Jazakallah khair. Jazakallah khair for the beneficial reminder. Barakallah feek. Very, very nice nuance in it, actually. Jazakallah khair. Perhaps a simple question, really. So, what advice do you have to those of us, I guess probably the majority of us that are in the workplace, basically professionals, particularly with regards to prioritizing maybe some of the points you mentioned, and the balance between obviously progressing in career and family life, particularly. Jazakallah khair. Probably a lot to cover, but
yeah, that's okay. So it's a very good question, because you need a practical answer. It's a question that needs a practical answer. I mentioned some things about ideals, about what we should try to achieve and what we should try to have in our lives. Okay, but on Monday morning, when I wake up, I've got to go to college, or I've got to go to university, or I've got to go to work. I've got mouths to feed. How do I start implementing what you have said? Because I think this is another problem for us, or as an obstacle for us. That a lot of the time as Muslims we speak in theoretical terms, or we speak about in utopian terms, about everything's perfect and everything's like, everything's great and this is what we should be doing, and all these terms are used. But a lot of the time it's like I'm grasping, it's like, it sounds good, it sounds great, but then now what? And I think that for a lot of Muslims, that's where a lot of benefit is lost, because they don't know how to live Islam. They don't know how to, if that's the correct word, to Islamicize their own lives. How do I take the guidance from the Quran and implement that on a daily basis? Or the Sunnah of Rasulullah, how do I make that something practical for me? Now, what I would say is that, because the answer is really, probably deserves a lecture and more than a lecture than that. But on top of what I have said just in the lecture, or the advice that I gave a few minutes ago, is that living Islam is not something which is very difficult. And as the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "Inna hada deen yusr," that this is a deen of ease. It is a deen of ease. And when the Prophet ﷺ sent Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu to the people of Yemen, he said to him, "Yassiru wa la tu'assiru." Make things easy and don't make things difficult. "Bashiru wa la tunaffiru." Give people glad tidings and don't run them away. Not to hide things, but to give them the true picture of what Islam is. Now, if you are, and I saw actually yesterday on some of these shelves, and I can see them there actually. The book, The Fortress of the Muslim, Hisnul Muslim, that dua book. That is a practical manual of how a Muslim, to some extent, will live their life on a daily basis. Because as a Muslim, we want to feel fulfilled. We want to feel as though, because I'm a Muslim, I'm praying, but sometimes I feel a little bit empty. I don't feel my iman is strong enough. I want to feel fulfilled, right, as a Muslim. So then how do I bring this about? So if you look through that book, for example, Hisn al-Muslim, you'll find a number of things that you are to do and to say from the moment that you wake up. So from the moment that you wake up, you remind yourself that you are a Muslim. Alhamdulillahi alladhi ahyana ba'dama amatana wa ilayhi an-nushur. All praise is due to Allah who gave me life after the minor death, the sleep, and to Him we will return. And this, every morning when you wake up from sleep, that's the dua that you will make. And in the book, there's the meaning of it. There's the transliteration of it. So I can't read Arabic, so it has the transliteration, i.e. the English letters for you to pronounce and say the Arabic, until you've learned the Arabic or the Arabic language, the letters that is. Before you enter the bathroom, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khaba'ith. When you come out, ghufranak. Before you make wudu, after you make wudu. That's a practical living example of what to do as a Muslim on a daily basis. Now added to that, the obligations that you are offering, like your 5 daily prayers. If you're doing this on a daily basis, you'll soon come to realize that the secret, or that what was missing really was right there in front of me. What it is to Islamicize or make my life more Islamic. It's not a difficult thing. So looking through that's just one example, for example, as I've mentioned to you. You'll find that there's a big change very, very quickly. Now I'm sure that many other examples or things can be said to help you on that journey. But what comes to my mind is that book. And if you don't have the book, you can have the application on your phone. Wallahu a'lam. That's right. That's true. Yes, I mean, that's the author of or the compiler, I should say, the compiler of that book, Shaykh Sa'id ibn Ali ibn Abu Wafa al-Qahtani, rahimahullah. He died maybe a couple of weeks ago. And he's an individual that, I mean, he wasn't really that known. He wasn't known at all, really, if you like. I mean, he doesn't have any followers on any of the social medias, whether it be Instagram or Facebook or so on. He didn't have none of that. But subhanAllah, imagine a person who did that action, khalisun li wajhillah, done it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed that one action that he did all those years ago, and allowed that action to continue for him. And even the times are changing, because when that was written or compiled, there was in a time of writing. It wasn't a time of, devices and whatnot. Before by Allah's permission and bounty, that book now, Allah allowed that book to go with the times, and has now been transferred as an application on your devices and whatnot. So it still stays with the people, subhanAllah. So, and it's not just, a book of du'as, but it's practical, the practicalities of how you live your life on a daily basis. So if one has that will help them so much, inshallah ta'ala. Allah knows best.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
I'm just going to make my question quick. It's relating to history. Alhamdulillah, I am originally from Kenya, and it's by and large, the people from Kenya by and large of African origin, alhamdulillah. And I consider this to be a huge blessing. Now when you come to Britain, you find the bulk of the people here, the dominant population here is the white people, and Africans are mainly minority in this country. If you look at the history of these two ethnicities, it's a very painful history. We all know about this. Alhamdulillah, by and large, most of this painful history is now past. But that's on the explicit scene. But on the implicit scene, you still find issues. For example, if you look at the statistics, you find a huge problem in terms of the average income or the number of CEOs between these two ethnicities. This is why I consider it to be a big blessing for me to have been raised in Kenya, because all this, you're masked away from all these issues. Now, we are all humans, and this issue sometimes can encroach into Islam. And I was wondering what advice you could give Muslims in order to be able to not fall into this trap. Like, for example, like Hafsh Salam or something like this. I was wondering if you could probably give this.
Okay. So if we look at the life, if the question wasn't entirely clear, or if you couldn't hear, inshallah ta'ala, through my answer, you'll hear what the question was, as I understood it at least. So if we look at the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we will find that the companions themselves were from various backgrounds. From them, Bilal ibn Rabah, originally from Habasha, Suhaib al-Rumi, who originally was Arab, but was taken as a very young child and lived in amongst the Byzantians, and then later returned. Suhaib al-Rumi is an amazing story, if you can read it as well, radiyallahu anhu. And also Salman al-Farisi, radiyallahu anhu. So you find that the Prophet ﷺ dealt with all of the companions not based upon the origin, but as Muslims. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came, or rather gave us revelation so that we could understand our existence, and not to judge people by where we come from or the languages that we speak. But we know that Allah Azza wa Jalla says, "Inna akramakum indallahi atqakum," that the most honored in the sight of Allah Azza wa Jalla is the one who has the most taqwa. So there are those who are who were brought up or lived in places where people didn't look at where you came from or your color of your skin. You weren't judged for that. But the way of the world is that you go to other places, and for unfortunate reasons that does play an important, not important, it's prevalent in that society, I should say, unfortunately. And a person has to get through a lot of challenges and face a lot of difficulties. But within our Muslim community, we can't speak on behalf of all societies, but within Muslims, we need to ensure that we eradicate that. We can't have within our own Muslim communities where people are looked at because of the color of their skin, iyadhan billah, or because of the language that a person speaks. This is not for us to do that. And we know that the Prophet, and you mentioned the hadith, that, shall I not tell you something? أَلَا أَدُلُّكُمْ عَلَى شَيْءٍ إِذَا فَعَلْتُ تَحَابَبْتُمْ? Should I not tell you something that if you do it, that you will have love amongst yourselves? أَفْشُ السَّلَامَ بَيْنِكُمْ. Quite simply, is to give each other salams. Now, a lot of times belittled, but simply giving salams, عَلَى مَنْ تَعْرِفْ وَمَنْ لَمْ تَعْرِفْ, upon those you know and that you don't know, will go so far in bringing us together. So the brothers, Allah had mentioned a very important point about spreading salams amongst ourselves, and that this is one of the cures of eradicating some of the things that may exist, unfortunately, in some people's hearts. I know I've really touched on a few of your points. So may Allah really help us. Barakallahu feekum. Jazakallah khair.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. Yes, wa alaikum salam.
I'd like you to just educate us on what was your Islamic education journey? Did you have to go abroad to learn about Islam, or did you learn it here in the UK? And how easy or difficult was that journey?
You're asking in general, are you? Sorry?
No, your journey.
My journey?
Yeah.
So, I mean, my journey essentially is not unique. My time that and I'm still studying, of course, like we all are. But my going abroad to Medina is not anything unique. There are, mashallah, many hundreds of brothers who have done that before and are doing it now. So 3 years after me embracing Islam, in 1997, I applied to Medina. I went to Medina, and I did Arabic for 3 years in the Arabic Institute. And then I did an undergraduate degree in Sharia, and I did that for 4 years, and I came back in 2004. And then I came back to the UK. I started working as a school teacher, and then I became imam. And then I did a master's in Sharia in SOAS University in London. I did that 2013 to 15. No. Jazakumullah khair. Any more questions?
What lesson should we take, adopt from your journey?
I mean, I think, if a person's looking to take lessons from life, we look to Rasulullah alayhi salam. My life is not that important. we look to the life of Rasulullah alayhi salam, take ibar, we take lessons from his life, because he's the best of men alayhi salam. And throughout my learning, that's all, that's the most beloved individual to us all, that we all have that in common. And the more we study his life alayhi salam, the more we can benefit from his seerah. Now.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. Yes, sister, go ahead.
So another question. With the vices and the things that are defined as munkar in Islam now becoming the norm in our society, based on your experience with society, what is the best way of tackling such vices to enable our children not become so into these vices such as alcohol and various other vices? Is it a family thing? Is it a society thing? Is it a masjid thing? Or is it a national thing? How best do we tackle such a thing so that it doesn't continue to become an explosive problem in our society?
So when we are talking about protecting ourselves from haram, from munkarat, we as Muslims, as followers of the faith of Islam, are free to do that. Are free to have our view of what we deem to be evil. Okay? You can't be seen as an extreme person for having those views. As a religious person, you're entitled to that. It really starts in protecting ourselves and protecting our children. If we look at the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, وَجْنُبَنِي وَبَنِيَّ أَن نَعْبُدُ الْأَصْنَامِ. Ibrahim alayhi salam, he made a dua, oh Allah, protect me and my dhurriya, and my progeny, my children, from the worship of idols. So Ibrahim alayhi salam made dua to protect him and his family from the greatest of all evils, which was associating partners with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Similarly, that we will be making dua to Allah Azza wa Jalla to protect us and to protect our children from all haram. That's something we should all be doing. Secondly, is that, especially with the youth, and that's when the Prophet ﷺ would tell people this is haram, and at times when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about haram, there's a reason why it's haram, there's a reason why it's harmful. There's a reason that we don't do this. That's extremely important for the younger minds to understand, and not just to be said, it's haram, don't do it. Okay, I mean, initially they may, I won't do it, because they're listening to their parents and they're young. But when they start to think for themselves or understanding in their own way, you need to be a bit more nuanced in how you explain things to them. Say, this is haram because it's harmful and the consequences are these. So this is a form of educating your child to knowing, so they grow up knowing what's haram. And this is why it's haram. Okay? And on the same token, we pray because we have to pray. But why do you have to pray? Because it's your link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you never want to cut your link with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's about explaining. It's about explaining things to the children, the youth. This is why we do things and this is why we don't do these things. And all of this comes together, which identifies us as Muslims. Okay, so it goes back to some of the things that we mentioned earlier. These things we define as haram. It's not allowed for us to do that because of these evils. And these things are an obligation for us because this is what identifies. I mean, no one in the world prays 5 times a day. No one prays like the Muslim. Okay? These kind of things that they feel a form of izzah. There's a form of honor in their prayer. And they feel proud that they are praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is an ongoing form of tarbiyah, of education to the youth and amongst ourselves. Because maybe for some of us, we're never too old to stop learning. For some of us, regardless of our age, and I don't really know why that's haram. Don't be shy. Why is this not allowed? Or is this allowed? Am I allowed to do this, or should I be doing this? Don't be shy. Don't hide, don't prevent yourself from knowing what you should be doing and what you should be staying away from. Wallahu ta'ala alam. Okay, inshallah ta'ala, so it's 9:45, I'll leave you to it, inshallah ta'ala. May Allah bless you all. Now.